Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this slow-looking session this afternoon from Royal Collection Trust. I'm delighted that you could join us this afternoon. So what we're going to do is we're going to take an hour out of our day. Let's step away from the stresses of everyday life and take a bit of a mindful break when looking at art and culture. So this afternoon's slow looking talk is focusing on a work which is currently on display in the King's Gallery, Buckingham Palace. It's called Royal Portraits, A Century of Photography. And if you would like to come and see it and you haven't done so yet, then you have until the 6th of October to join us to explore this photographic exhibition. But for the event this afternoon, I am delighted to be joined by two colleagues who hopefully will make themselves visible to you very soon. There's Lucia van der Drift from the Limina Collective. Welcome, Lucia.
Hi.
And Senior Curator of Photographs at Royal Collection Trust and Curator of our wonderful exhibition, Alessandro Nasini. Hello, Alessandro.
Hello, Amy. Hi, Lucia.
Hi.
So, thank you very much, both of you, for joining us. Now, this afternoon, we are going to be looking at a photograph of Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, which was taken by the artist Cecil Beaton in 1939, so when she was Queen Elizabeth. Alessandro, perhaps you could tell us just a very little bit about this photograph in relation to why we've chosen this one.
Yes, absolutely. And thank you so much for inviting me. I'm really delighted to be here today. The exhibition charts really the evolution of royal portrait photography over the past century, from the high glamour of the 1920s all the way pretty much to the present day, ending with the coronation of Their Majesties, King Charles III and Queen Camilla just over a year ago now. Across the decade, we present over 150 photographs by over 44 different photographers. However, out of these photographers, Cecil Beaton has a special place, and many people would probably would link his name to royal portraiture. And because of that, we decided to go for one of his works, and specifically a work from the first sitting that Beaton had with Queen Elizabeth, and later Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, which were very special for many reasons, which I'm going to talk about a little bit more later on. But I think that Lucia was particularly struck by this image, and now I think she will going to tell us why she was particularly attracted by this one.
Yeah, well, thank you, Alessandro, and thank you, Amy, as well, for inviting me. We shall be looking at the actual photograph shortly, but what really struck me about it is it's quite painterly-like. It's a beautiful composition, and it also shows these beautiful contrasts. And I just think it's a delightful photograph. So and we usually for our work try to select a photograph that's pleasing and attractive. So it ticked all the boxes. So I'm really pleased we're going to spend some time with this photograph.
Thank you both. So Lucia, shall we have a look at the photograph, and you can give us a brief intro to mindfulness and slow looking?
Yeah. Just a moment, Amy. I'm back.
Perfect.
I was just setting it up as it should be in the background. Okay, and this is not what it should be, but this is it. Sorry. So
Lovely. There
yeah.
she is.
Took me a while, but here we go. It was worth waiting for, I hope. So here we have our photograph, and I just have a few quick fire looking questions for our audience. So maybe you can join in brainstorming a bit. And my first question to you is really, what strikes you most about this photograph? And it's just a question about what strikes you most about this photograph. It could be very, very different. I guarantee it's very different for each of us, what strikes us most. And my second question is, what is one thing that delights you most about this photograph? Just finding, it might take a while for you to find something, but maybe it's there straight away, something that delights you about this photograph. It could be a gesture or posture, a small thing or a bigger thing. It could be memory even. What delights you most about this photograph? And then my last question to you. If you had to choose 3 adjectives to describe this photograph, what would you choose? What 3 adjectives would you choose to describe this photograph? I'm going to stop sharing my screen again for a moment, and then we'll come back, of course, to the photograph a bit later. So here we are. I'd like to just say a few words before we start the slow looking component of this session. I wanted to say a bit, well, first I'm Lucia van der Drift. I'm part of the Limina Collective alongside of Carly Allen. And what we're doing with Limina Collective is we are applying mindfulness principles to looking at art. And we've been part of a number of events with the Royal Collection. And I'm delighted to be back again for a digital session today. I'll shortly will introduce a mindful pause, so inviting you to join in with that, which is basically a 3-minute meditation. And after that, we'll go back to our photograph, and we'll spend quite a bit of time looking at it. I'll guide you through some slow looking. And after we've done that, I have a few prompts for you, writing prompts for you, so we can spend a bit more time in a reflective mode with this photograph. So that's the idea. So I propose to start with our 3-minute mindful pause. So I'll guide you through that. So I'm inviting you to feel the feet on the ground, and we'll be looking at contrasts in our experience as well. So inviting you to perhaps close the eyes for a moment and maybe open it again. And then you'll really find quite a vast difference there between having the eyes open and having the eyes closed. Well, if you're comfortable with that, let's keep the eyes closed for a few moments. And then perhaps if you can bring your attention to your feet, feeling the hard floor, if that's what you're feeling under the soles of the feet, or just feeling your body in contact with the chair. There might be backrest as well. So feeling that hardness of that chair, or wherever you feel the body in contact with some hardness. And then perhaps you might also feel any areas of the body that feels a bit more soft. So we've got hard and soft. And then perhaps let's listen to some sounds. I've got an airplane in the background and some children. But perhaps just listen to some sounds. You might want to count some sounds. Maybe you can find 5 coming to the ear. So finding some sounds, and then perhaps also noticing when there's no sound, so the silence between the sounds, finding silence between sounds. And then perhaps you're sitting still. And you can bring a tiny bit of movement in your sitting, maybe swaying the body side to side gently, or backwards and forwards. So we just have that sitting still and a tiny bit of movement. So we have that contrast there. And then inviting you to open the eyes again and engage again with the screen. So I hope you're back. So that was our mini meditation, our mindful pause. And or you could say that mindfulness is about attention and bringing your attention back. It's training your attention actually to come back. And often our attention is caught up. It's caught up in thinking and in proliferating and perhaps ruminating, thinking about the past. And sometimes that is not so helpful for emotions. We could sort of get worry or stress or anxiety in relation to these thoughts. So what we're doing with mindfulness is bringing the mind back to the present moment, which also means it's coming out of rumination. And so that's supposed to make us a bit calmer. We don't know that yet. We'll find out after we've done the looking. But the looking at the contrast is a good way of occupying that cognitive part of the mind that wants to go into proliferation and just keeping it occupied, as it were, with very simple cognitive processes, such as feeling hard or soft or warm and cold. So there, that's where contrasts might have a place in mindfully engaging with our environment, with our body, our experience, and with looking at art and looking at a photograph today. So I'm going to start sharing my screen again, and hope that is all going to be very easy. And it is. And let me just bring us to my next slide, which is just to let you know again that this is the exhibition at the Blue Room. And if you look at the left-hand side, you can see this big red arrow, and that's the photograph that we'll be looking at today. And let's bring that photograph up again on our screen. Here we are, and so we're looking at a photograph by Cecil Beaton, made of the Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother. And you could also see, maybe you saw that on the slide we looked at before, just to give you an idea of the format. So 20 centimeters, 26 centimeters by 22.2 centimeters, and it's a gelatin silver print. So let's start our slow looking now. So hope you join in with this next bit. So here we have the photograph in front of us, and just perhaps feeling that weight of the body on the chair again as we're resting our eyes on this photograph. Just allowing the eyes to get used to the looking. There's no rush. And perhaps asking yourself, how do you feel as you're looking? How are you feeling as you're taking in this image? And there might be a lot of questions and thoughts and associations and feelings coming up, things you might know or not know, but perhaps for this slow looking part, let those thoughts maybe be for what they are, let them come and go and come back to the looking. Let's mark the main elements in this photograph first. We have a figure seated on a low wall with two supports or pillars, you could say, on either side. Let's look at the darker areas of this image first. And perhaps with your eyes you could find the very darkest point in this photograph. There might be more darkest point, but just settle on one. And perhaps for a few cycles of breathing, we could just focus on that one darkest point. And then letting go of that dark point, let's do the same with the lighter area. So finding the lightest areas in this image, just allowing the eye to find those lightest areas. And when you're finding a lightest point somewhere, settle on it. Doesn't matter which you find, just settle on one, choose one. And let's just stay there with our attention for a few cycles of breathing. Now let's look further at contrasts in this photograph. And you might see that very dark area on the right hand side, vegetation perhaps. And then the support is like framing that area. So let's just look at that contrast between light and dark here. And then just inviting you to follow that line where dark and light meet here. And follow that line from the top to the bottom. Noticing any curves along the way. And perhaps also noticing when that line gets a bit sharper or a bit more fuzzy, if that happens. And then at some point, finding ourselves back at the bottom of the photograph. Now let's explore horizontals and verticals in this photograph. Just inviting you to find any horizontals here, any horizontal lines that your eye catches. And we can do the same with verticals, just finding vertical lines. Just picking them out with the eye. And then also noticing those rectangular panels in the background of the image. And from that background, let's explore those pillars or supports a bit more. So we have these two supports. And perhaps we could notice that when we compare the two, that one is facing a slightly different way, it's at a slightly different angle. And taking in the shapes of those sculpted bodies, the head and the shoulders, the chest, the waist and that draped cloth. And now let's shift from these sculpted figures to the living figure who has taken a seat between these supports. Let's have a closer look. Noting the position of the figure, the straight back, And then let's spend some time exploring her dress. The puff sleeves, the skirt draped on the wall, the gauze overlay of the skirt, and the floral pattern on the fabric. And perhaps for a few moments comparing this floral pattern to those patterns on the columns. Scales versus flowers. And also noting the smooth surface of these columns, and perhaps compared to the soft texture of her gown. And let's come back to the puff sleeves, noticing there's some arm visible between the sleeves and the gloves, both the arm we see nearest to us and the arm furthest away. The folds in the gloves. One hand holding a parasol. And the other hand, a bracelet on the wrist. And the fingers resting on the edge of the wall. Now briefly come back to your own hand or your own hands, just sensing into them and feeling the weight of those hands. Just a moment with ourselves. And then let's come back to the figure again and let's move more closely. Clearly noticing the circular shape of the hat. Seems to have a double rim, 2 circles. And a flowery strip of material visible at the top of her head. The rise and fall of her hair. And a tendril of hair above the ear. The shape of the earring. Then let's look at the profile of her face. Noticing the line of her profile set against the background of the hat. Let's gently trace that profile from the forehead to the chin. And then noticing the different features in her face. The shape of the eyebrow. The eye, the eyelid. The lashes. And just that iris just visible beneath those lashes. The curve of the cheek. The nose. And the mouth. Do you see a curve of a smile? And taking in the whole face. Spending some time meeting that face. And for a moment wondering how to read the expression on that face. And feel into your own face for a moment. How does that feel? Let's now come back to the whole image. There we are. Taking in all these elements we looked at. The supports with these sculpted figures. The contrasts of dark and light. The patterns on these columns. And on the dress, the sleeves and the arms. And then the head with the hat. And the expression on that face. So from here, let's come back to the edge of the photograph on the screen. Just clearly noticing the edge of the photograph on your screen. And then looking at the actual device that you're using to access this session. A screen or a laptop or a desktop or a phone perhaps, or a tablet. And as we're looking at the device, perhaps looking away from the screen now and just taking in the room around you, noticing objects, darker areas, lighter areas. Verticals and horizontals. And shadows. And then bringing this slow looking to close here. And I'll guide you shortly to the next slide, which is a prompt for us to look at, and the photo again, as we've done, but just to write down some thoughts. And this is just an idea, is just to write from the top of your head, whatever comes up. There's no right or wrong, it doesn't have to be correct in terms of spelling, just you writing down some thoughts. So I hope you will have a pen at hand, so I'll introduce the first prompt to you now. So this is just a free write in response to the photograph. So I have a few minutes to write in response to this photograph. And then getting ready, maybe just stop writing if you're writing, I hope you are, and then getting ready for the next prompt. So reread what you've written and underline any phrases that strike you or words, and then choose one, write it on top of your page and write more about this particular phrase or word. So that's another 2 minutes for us. And then lastly, read what you've written and perhaps reflect on any thoughts or any insights perhaps, or things that really surprised you. And then if you, for us, for those of you who are watching the live stream, if you do have any comments, anything that struck you whilst we're doing the looking or reflecting on this image, you might want to put them in the chat. And we're very happy for you to do that. So just a minute to reflect and perhaps share some thoughts in the comments. Well, thank you so much so far. I will, for now, let's say goodbye to the photograph, and I'll stop sharing my screen now. We're back.
Thank you, Lucia. I don't know about you, Alessandro, but I feel very calm now. Thank you for guiding us through that.
I'm glad.
Do you know, I have to say, I've seen that photograph in the gallery lots of times, but I'm almost slightly ashamed to admit that I've never stopped and really looked at it in the way that you're guiding us through. Really takes us, Lucia. And what struck me about this photograph, and I know this is part of the theme of the exhibition, of this session, is the contrasts. And in that writing prompt, when you said to just kind of look and write, and I realized when I went back to it that I had written a lot about contrasts, about the softness of Queen Elizabeth herself against the hardness of the stone, the light color in it, the dark on the edges in her hair. But then also I really started to notice the contrast in some of the detail, with you've got lots of large swathes of stone and what appear to be quite blank areas. And then I really noticed the detail of the sort of fish scale decoration in the columns, and then the lace in her dress.
Yes.
And then the sort of lace decorative element on her parasol.
Yes, there is that thing hanging on the parasol, isn't there?
Yeah, so I really really noticed those smaller bits of detail as looking at it more closely.
Oh, that sounds lovely. Yeah. And I actually think the longer you look, I mean, the more you see, of course, but you can't ever see everything. It seems to be impossible. How is that for you, Alessandro?
No, yes, absolutely. As well as feeling very calm and relaxed, as Amy mentioned. I, again, really appreciated some of the details that you very kindly pointed out at. And especially for me, I think was, as well as the horizontal and vertical lines to do with the composition, it's also some of the details like the double rim of the hat, which of course has maybe the structure plus a sort of level layer of taffeta or something like that. I'm not sure what it is, but very, very ethereal kind of material.
Yeah.
And again, all the details of the lace and the dress and the parasol, this sort of Edwardian elegance, if you want, even though obviously we are quite, later on, and it's not quite Edwardian times, but it's definitely captured that sort of period elegance. And to go back to Amy's point, absolutely, I mean, photography is capturing light, but it's also capturing shadows. I mean, they have to work together. Light and shade, they have to work together. Otherwise, you won't have any results. And that is beautiful example of with a very this sort of photography, gelatin silver prints. You can have the very dark blacks, the true blacks and the true light whites, and everything in between. So it is a play of contrasts, absolutely. So it's quite a beautiful choice for expressing that sort of relationship.
Thank you.
And shall I talk a little bit more about the sitting, about perhaps be more about Beaton and so on, the relationship with our family?
Lovely.
Perfect.
So
Thank you, Alessandro.
My pleasure. I try now to share my screen. Which should be this one here. Share. Here we are. Hopefully you can all see this. As I mentioned earlier, Cecil Beaton is one of those photographers who had a very long association with members of the family, and perhaps is the best known royal photographer, as it were. He starts being commissioned by members of the family from the late 1920s, and his association lasts until the very end of 1979, only 2 months before his death in January 1980. In this photograph here, you can see the man, Cecil Beaton, taking photographs of the Prince Edward as a baby. Was born in 1964. Prince Edward is the present Duke of Edinburgh and last child of the late Queen Elizabeth II and Prince Philip. As I mentioned, this on the left-hand side is the very first royal commission that Beaton received by a member of their family. And we have here Princess Louise. She was one of the children of Prince Albert and Queen Victoria. And on the right-hand side, there are some of the commissions one of the commissions that Beaton received by the Duke and Duchess of Kent. This particular photograph is from 1934 and shows the Duke with this very sharp line in the back. Talking about contrast, I chose this photograph, which is also included in the exhibition. Both are actually to show this sort of contrast between light and shadow, and the very strong contrast also helped by the use of backlight, which you can see on the left-hand side of the image, which is something very typical of Beaton during the 1920s and 30s. The Duke and the Duchess of Kent were one of Britain's most fashionable couples at the time. And actually, it is believed that it's through sort of the help of Princess Marina, who was the Duchess of Kent, that Beaton was commissioned to photograph Queen Elizabeth. This is because Princess Olga of Yugoslavia, who was one of the sisters of Princess Marina, happened to be in London to visit, and she was hosted together with her husband by the King and Queen, so George VI and Queen Elizabeth. But for some sort of medical reasons, Prince Paul of Yugoslavia had to stay a little longer than scheduled, and to help her sister to sort of pass the time, Princess Marina suggested that a sister, Princess Olga, could be photographed by Beaton. And this happened in July 1939, and it is believed that 2 days after Princess Olga showed the photographs to Queen Elizabeth, that she commissioned Beaton to photograph her. This was the first commission by a senior member of the family. Queen Elizabeth was, of course, queen at the time. And these are 2 photographs from the sitting. The sitting started inside Buckingham Palace, and the image you see on the left-hand side, you can see the Queen in profile, photographed against a painted background, which is quite typical of Beaton around this time. And the sitting was in fact meant to be lasting just about 20 minutes, which is the average kind of length of time a royal sitting lasts. But Queen Elizabeth and Beaton really enjoyed their time together and working together, and in the end they spent over 5 hours actually together. And the sitting from the palace moved on to the garden, and you can see on the right hand side one of these photographs in which the Queen is wearing the same dress and parasol as shown in the previous in the photograph that Lucia was mentioning. And once again, you can see the use of backlight. You can see the sun showing through the trees and through the parasol and the Queen's overskirt. The dress which survives is by Norman Hartnell. And sometimes there's a little confusion because people think it's part of the white wardrobe, but actually this particular dress is a very pale pink. And actually there are some images here again. And this is very likely that this is the original wardrobe that Norman Hartnell designed for the Queen for the state visit in 1938, which had to be postponed because the Queen Elizabeth's mother died suddenly, and then because of that reason, Hartnell had to redesign the old dress, the old wardrobe, in white, which was an acceptable color for mourning, as well as black. And these actually, therefore, the original dresses that Hartnell designed for the Queen, which she didn't eventually wear for the state visit, but also obviously had the chance to show them off for Beaton. And you can see here the Queen was really performing for Beaton. And these 3 photographs are what you will see if you visit the gallery. You will see the photograph we discussed earlier on the left-hand side, and the other 2 next to it. And on the right-hand side, you can see the very, once again, the sharp contrast between light and dark and then shadows. There's a tree trunk on the right-hand side, in a way similar to the portrait of Prince George, the Duke of Kent, which we saw earlier on. This, of course, was very significant as a sitting because sort of formed the start of a very harmonious rapport between Cecil Beaton and Queen Elizabeth, which would last for decades. In this slide here, we have a photograph showing on the left-hand side the royal family during the war. This photograph was taken at Royal Lodge, and you can see the family as a sort of domestic unit. You can see the contrast between the image on the left-hand side and one on the right, which is post-war, 1948, during which Beaton reverts to his sort of more peculiar and kind of his own style of high glamour, using painted backdrops and so on, and depicting Queen Elizabeth as a super glamorous figure. As I said, the relationship with not just with Queen Elizabeth lasted for decades, and of course, as many would know, Beaton was chosen to be the official photographer for the coronation of Queen Elizabeth II in June 1953. And of course, on the left-hand side, you'll see the official portrait of Queen Elizabeth II on Coronation Day, and on the right-hand side, a photograph taken in the same afternoon following the coronation in one of the rooms at Buckingham Palace, with the Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother at this point, with pages. And of course, the association carried on pretty much throughout Beaton's life. As I said, he continued to receive commissions from members of the family all the way to 1979, November 1979, so only 2 months before his death. And these two photographs are from the last sitting that Beaton had with Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother. They were taken at Royal Lodge in 1970, and these were eventually released to mark the Queen Mother's 70th birthday. However, the two remained friends until pretty much the death of the photographer. And I want to end this section by reading out a passage from a letter that Queen Elizabeth wrote to Beaton in 1963. Beaton sent her a book of portraits called Royal Portraits, and the Queen sends back a note to thank him for the gift, and she writes, and I read out, and I quote, "I find it very nostalgic looking through the pages. The year's telescope, and I suddenly remembered that I felt what I felt like when I wore those pre-war garden party clothes all those years ago. It is absolutely fascinating to look back, and I feel that as a family, we must be deeply grateful to you for producing us as really quite nice and real people." And real is underlined. End of quote. And this, I think, is really sort of summarizes the very special and strong relationship that Beaton had with Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, of course, but also with other members of the family. And that's why we decided to choose one of his photographs for this event. And now I believe the word is back, the microphone, as it were, is back to Amy. So just stop sharing my screen and we'll be able to rejoin you all together.
Thank you, Alessandro, for giving us insight into the relationship between Queen Elizabeth, Queen Mother, and Cecil Beaton. I think that was a lovely way to round up the slow looking and the contrast in the photograph to have that bit of context and history. So what I'm going to do now is just give all of our participants just a little bit of extra information. If hearing Alessandro talk about the exhibition has whetted your appetite and you'd like to hear more, with some more in-depth, just Alessandro talking, giving an introduction to the display, then you can join us online for Digital Exhibitions Curator's Introduction on Tuesday, the 24th of September. If you are local and within travelling distance of the King's Gallery at Buckingham Palace, then Alessandro is joined a couple of days later on Thursday, the 26th of September, for an in-person event in the King's Gallery, talking about what it's like to photograph the royal family from royal photographer Hugo Vickers. And then a further digital event just to kind of round up the programming for Royal Portraits. On the 1st of October, you can have a little bit more behind the scenes information, really, as we talk a little bit about conservation and how the photographs are looked after, and the work that's done to them before they're brought out to be put on in an exhibition like this. So as I mentioned at the start, you do have until the 6th of October to come and see Alessandro's wonderful exhibition if you haven't done so already. If you're joining us from overseas, then do join one of the digital events so you can get that extra bit of input. And you can find out more about these events, scan the QR code on the screen or look at our website at rct.uk. Then just another type of digital event that we run, if you're interested or you know anyone who is blind or partially sighted, then the first Tuesday of each month, we explore a different item in the Royal Collection, which we describe and then talk about for a little bit more context. And then just before we finish, Lucia, any final points from you on the photograph that we can see again on the screen of the exhibition before we wrap up this afternoon?
No, I just wanted to say that if you haven't seen or visited the exhibition yet, I really encourage you to do it. I think it's a fabulous exhibition, and also to say, well, how we've looked at this particular photograph. And I really enjoyed hearing Alessandro talking about the relationship with Beaton. But you could use any of those photographs in the exhibition or anywhere, and just give yourself 5 minutes or so to just gently look and be with that photograph. So that's my last words, I think.
Thank you, Lucia. Yes, you're right. It's sometimes very easy, isn't it, to rush through the day, whatever your day might be, without just taking 5 or 10 minutes to yourself to stop, to look at something in detail or just to breathe. So thank you for taking us through this afternoon, giving us that hour to step away from our busy lives. Thank you everyone for joining us. We do hope to see you again, either in one of our slow looking lectures or one of our other digital events. We hope you've enjoyed it. Take care and enjoy the rest of your day. Bye-bye, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Alessandro. Amy.
Bye bye.
Bye.
You all.